Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations, I'm Audley Stevenson, and this is the most audacious podcast on the web. That's right. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast. It's a pleasure to be here as we continue our goal of helping you live your best audacious life ever. You can connect with our podcast through social media. Our channels are just one of the great ways that you can connect with us, and I'd encourage you to like, follow, subscribe, and share. Tell a friend, do what you got to do, because this is a place to be where we continue to spread all that good audaciousness. Now, on this episode of the podcast, we're going to profile Randell Adjei, who was recently named Ontario's first ever Poet Laureate. And that's, of course, thanks to a unanimous motion that was passed at Queen's Park. This is big news, and I'm really excited for Randell and his family. And when the word came out, I can just imagine how ecstatic everyone was. Randell, of course, is a poet. He's an author. He's a community leader who hails from Scarborough, Ontario, which is a borough on the east side of Toronto. And, he's deserving of this honor. If you look at all the work that he's done as a spoken word artist, he tirelessly gives back to the culture, and just really, really proud of him to get to this point. Tell you a little bit about the position itself, because it was dubbed the Poet Laureate Act in Ontario, and that was done in memory of the late Gord Downie of the group The Tragically Hip. He died in October 2017 after being diagnosed with a terminal brain cancer called Glioblastoma. The appointment is fitting, and the fact that both Downie and Adjei use the spoken word in remarkable ways to transform, to uplift, and to empower others. So it just only makes sense. The power behind our words, and the spoken word specifically, is tremendous. Our words truly have the ability to change lives. And just think about how you communicate others and how you can impact them with the things that you say. Our words can encourage people to achieve greatness. It provides support and can even heal others that are going through a tough time. Conversely, our words can also generate negative feelings and cause harm too. It's completely necessary that we remain true to who we are, and I would always encourage you to speak your truth and never suggest otherwise. However, how we do it and the words we use are important, and we need to be mindful that our words have the power that they can build or destroy, or heal or hurt, uplift or tear down. It can do all of those things. The choice is entirely up to you and how you choose to use them. Adjei completely understands this, and he joins the Audacious Living Podcast to chat about his new role, the new responsibilities that come with it, his artistic expression, and his personal mission to raise the profile of poets here in Ontario. It certainly was a great conversation, interesting, and so without any further ado, I'm going to give you a chance to hear with my chat with Ontario's first ever Poet Laureate, Randell Adjei. Enjoy. Randell Adjei is an author, inspirational speaker, and community leader who uses the spoken word to empower and transform others through edutainment. As a result of a private member's bill in Queen's Park, Adjei was unanimously appointed as Ontario's first ever Poet Laureate. It's an exciting opportunity because the role will open up a pathway to raise the profile of poetry and the spoken word in Ontario. Randell will discuss all this and more coming up next on the Audacious Living Podcast. Randell, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I can't complain. I'm excited about life. The sun is shining today, and there's so much to be grateful for, so I'm good. I'm good.
Awesome. Well, look, first and foremost, I know it's been a few weeks since the appointment, but again, congratulations on being Ontario's first Poet Laureate. That's like, I mean, I know the honor's got to feel good for you. Still feeling good?
I feel amazing. I feel, elated, excited about what it's going to be. And there's something about um, seeing the fruits, really ripen, or to see the fruits come to life. And when you keep watering and watering over time, at times you doubt, at times you wonder if it's really going to grow. Um, and I'm excited to be here.
Got you. So for those listening that may not be familiar with what a Poet Laureate does, especially representing the province of Ontario, we kind of start there to sort of give an idea of what the role is and what the expectation is moving forward.
So a poet laureate essentially is someone who represents, whether it's a municipal, provincial, or federal body. They represent an assembly, a provincial assembly. In my case, it's the legislative assembly. And it doesn't necessarily have to be political either. But essentially, in my case, I represent the Legislative Assembly of Ontario as an independent officer of Ontario as well. And my role essentially is about promoting arts and poetry across the province and raising the profile of poets, and using the arts and using poetry as a way to really speak about issues that are happening, or to raise awareness about certain things.
Yeah, and the arts provide such a tremendous opportunity to put whatever sort of issues or concerns really on the forefront, and that creative expression. So I think poetry is a fantastic vehicle to be able to whether represent issues, maybe underserved communities that don't have that voice. They now have that platform. Is that safe to say?
Essentially, yeah, they now have a platform, which I would have the opportunity to really advocate for and support. And the thing is artists have been doing this even before I got this position, and so my goal is, what can I do to really support what they've already been doing? How can I advocate? How can I shed a light on, spotlight what's been happening, whether it be events, whether it be festivals, whether it be artists, trailblazers, people who've come here before my time, and even have allowed this to be possible for me to be in a position like this. So I'm just looking to do whatever I can during this time.
Got you. Let's sort of talk about because you're the very first. So I mean, the question would be, well, why wasn't there one before, right? So how this is brand new, or can you kind of give that sort of piece for people to better understand?
So essentially, this is something that was, it is the first, and it's interesting, because it's actually the first provincial one in Canada as well too. We have a lot of municipal poet laureates,
Yep.
Like in Edmonton, in Nova Scotia, in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Here in Toronto, we have, but essentially, it's yeah, I guess essentially it being the first in the province, there is an opportunity to collaborate with the assembly and to create what it looks like. So in a way, people say, "Oh, it must be a lot of pressure," and I mean, yes and no. Like yes, because it's the first, but no, because it's the first at the same time too. I really have an opportunity to create a benchmark for what the future could look like for other poet laureates, and I think I'm also very keen on what can it look like to allow another poet laureate to step into the position and take it to the next level. I want it to be not just a foundation, but almost like a trampoline that they can just take it to that next level. Essentially,
I was thinking a springboard, right? Like someone stands on your shoulders and launches forward. I think that's really it is a tremendous opportunity. I think you're right. There are two sides of this coin where you can start something, but just the beginning of something even greater.
Exactly. Precisely. So it's interesting. It's a very cool time to be here. But poetry traditionally hasn't been an art form that I think gets a lot of love. I think there's a lot of visual artists, musicians get a lot of love, but I think poetry has been an art form that hasn't necessarily gotten the type of support that I think it can and should have as well too.
So when the news dropped, who'd you call first? Who was the first person you reached out to?
When the news dropped, well, it was interesting because when it first dropped, I told my parents about what happened. Like, my parents have sacrificed a lot, invested a lot, And those two kind of go in tandem in terms of how they sacrificed and how they invested. And I called them to let them know. I don't think they really understood. They're like, oh, good job. But it wasn't until they came to Queen's Park and sat down in Queen's Park and seen other MPPs kind of, clap for me, and they're like, oh, this is serious, because I made a decision long time ago to choose another path. I wanted to do poetry and community work. Whereas they said, Randell, you're too smart. You should be focusing in law and doing etc. But I think for them,
too smart.
Yeah, that's what my parents said. And it's again, we're talking about my parents can also be my grandparents, and so they're of a couple generations ahead of me. And so I think for them to think poet, like my son, I sacrificed my life to come to this country to give to my son, and he wants to be a poet, so I can only imagine for them their mindset, but I think it just brought everything together for them, and they're proud, of course.
Got you. No, that's amazing. I wonder if you could talk, Randell, a little bit about your work prior to this appointment, because I think all of what we do kind of sets us up for that next step, and whether the experiences, whether they're good or bad, how we're perceived good or bad, but I think they set us up for that next step and to the point that we are now. We can talk about what your journeys look like.
Yeah, my journey has not necessarily been a straight path, and I don't think any of us have a straight path on our journey, but I just recognize the need in our community to really be able to create space for young people to express themselves in a positive way. I was a really angry young person when I was younger. I got into a lot of trouble. I was just like, I got into a lot of trouble. Being so angry, I realized that I had a lot of pain that was festering inside of me. And this pain that was festering inside of me had no way out. And poetry was the only outlet that I was able to do so. Later on, basketball, but poetry was that consistent thing.
Right.
And it's also such an accessible art form. So I started this movement called R.I.S.E. After a near-death experience that I went through as well too. I created this space called R.I.S.E. And R.I.S.E. stands for Reaching Intelligent Souls Everywhere. And the whole premise behind it is, how do we use our art to spread awareness, to advocate, to heal, to build community, and also provide opportunities that were never there prior to. So essentially, R.I.S.E. started off as creating a safe space. That was the first aspect of it, because we didn't have it. I'm from Scarborough. Scarborough is like, I would not be the man I am today without Scarborough. But I recognize, what could I do to give back? How could I, galvanize my community? And so we started off by creating that safe space. Let's just say, a couple months in, 3 months in, 4 months in, some artist said, this is really amazing. I want to take, I love what's happening, and I want to take it to the next level. So we work with the city, and we were able to get some funding from the city to build something called the Edutainment Convention. And edutainment, I don't take any ownership of the term edutainment.
That was will hear us one.
You know, my man Oddly, you know it. A lot of people don't know that, so I feel like I always have to explain it every now and then. But
we're good here.
You're good. I love that. You wouldn't even imagine how many interviews I've had to explain. Like, can you tell me more about edutainment? Thank you. So essentially, it was really about creating an opportunity to learn and be entertained at the same time. But we also embedded that methodology into the artists that we work with. So when you come into our space, you're not just saying anything. What you say has to have some sort of resonance to the community, that it's helping the community in some capacity, shape, or form, until it became like a natural propensity for the artist. When they came on stage, they knew you can't say certain things on a R.I.S.E. stage. And so when we developed that second iteration, we worked with, some really incredible people came out: Andrina Mill, David Click Cox, Director X, Gavin Shepard, like some really great people came out to support. And we realized that maybe we could do more. A few years later, we were being asked by a number of organizations, a number of schools to book artists and book talent to come out. And we recognized the opportunity to create a booking agency. And so I share this to say that anyone that's listening, there's something called design thinking that I've learned. And design thinking is a human-centered approach to problem solving. It's an opportunity for you to not just say, you know what, there's a problem here, let me fix it with this. It's how about you take some time to really understand the problem, to learn to love the problem, to experience and explore and research how it affects people. So when you create a solution, there's a human-centered approach to what it is you're doing. And so that's the work I've been doing prior to. I've done a lot of work in schools, working with young people with the Toronto Public Library. I've done a lot. I'm not gonna, go on, but a lot of it has been community work around arts.
So design thinking, that's interesting. So I'm not familiar with that at all. And I think when you sort of, because really, from what I'm hearing from you, it really forces you to break it down on all facets and sort of live an experience, so to speak, before you even get to the problem solving stage. Is that fair to say?
That's pretty much it, because the idea behind it is that how can you say, like, when you create a solution, it's often for or to benefit a demographic of people.
Yeah.
But if you don't understand that demographic of people, if you don't understand their lived experiences, if
Yep.
you don't understand how the problem impacts their life, but even deeper, like why the problem even exists in the first place. And then there's people who benefit from these problems, and there's people that suffer from these problems at the same time.
Yes.
So the idea is really getting to the heart of the issue, so much so that the solution is like it's so deep in thought and deep in, like, I guess, the capacity to serve and help,
Right.
that it has a large impact on folks. And I think as an entrepreneur in my life, that's something that I love to share for those that may not be familiar with the concept.
Got you. Oh, I've learned something, so thank you for that bit of education.
We learn every day.
Something else I wanted to touch with you on is representation and the significance of that. And you sort of touched on that a moment ago. To be in the role that you are, to having the opportunity to impact your community, and I recognize you represent all communities, but certainly your community is going to look to you, young poets, young creative types, will look and say, "Wow, look, there's Randell. There's what a possibility looks like." How significant is that to you?
I think it's extremely significant. There's often times where we don't see folks that look like us in positions that we want to go to. And I remember being younger and perhaps just not seeing anyone outside of basketball or entertainment that was doing something positive for me to be able to say, like, I can go further and look at it. So I think about the young boy out there who is writing poetry or creating art. I think about the young girl out there who really wants to take her talents to the next level, but might be told that art is not the way to go, that you won't survive as an artist. That term starving artist doesn't exist in my circle. At least we all found a way to make it happen. And I think when I think about representation, I want any young Black youth child to just be able to see this opportunity and say, if he can do it, I can do it too, because someone did that for me. That's how I even got here. Someone that looked like me did it for me. So we gotta do that each one teach one mentality.
That's right. That's right. No, I can see that loud and clear, and I'm glad you touched on that. A piece that's also very important. So on this podcast, we talk a lot. Obviously, Audacious is a big theme of what we discussed, and boldness and courage. When I think of artists, to be able to really to really represent themselves in the proper way, they've got to really open up their souls, and so to speak, and that's where we talk about the tremendous amount of courage that's required to do that, to really be true to your craft. I wonder if you sort of touch on that, because I think that's sometimes, oftentimes recognized fully to the degree that artists really have to open themselves up the way they do.
Yeah, it takes a lot, because we live in a society that often finds vulnerability as a sign of weakness. It's something that I highly disagree with. And I disagree because to be vulnerable, it requires a certain level of bravery and courage just to be able to open yourself and be authentic in the first place. And so when I think about that, I think about being an artist, you kind of have to learn to explore the world around you. It's important to learn how to be vulnerable, because there's a very sacred experience that happens between the artist and the audience.
Right.
There's a conversation that is happening naturally between the artist and the audience that I find, our being here as artists is to speak about the times.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to be vulnerable about what's happening in your perspective, so others can kind of have an opportunity to see what it looks like to speak up
Yeah.
about what's happening. And it really does inform my craft a lot, because when I put pen to paper, it's really about taking the things that I've learned and the experiences that I've gained and putting it into something that maybe a normal conversation wouldn't necessarily allow us to have, but you can capture that in like a 1 minute spoken word poem.
Right. Well, again, telling your story, and again, vulnerability, I think, is the ideal word I was searching for. But that is, I think, a really, really important element to be able to do. And we both know there's much strength in being vulnerable, right? That takes a tremendous amount of strength. And although society views it very differently, the work that artists do to be vulnerable and put themselves out there, it's tremendous. So I applaud all artists that do that.
Thank you.
For sure.
More, man.
I lastly, and I really appreciate you taking, the time which you have, and I lastly want to sort of touch on the role in terms of the expectations moving forward, and really when you arrived, if you will, at your, because it's a 2-year appointment. So once you got to the end of that, how do you know that you succeeded, or how do you know that you've accomplished what you had set out to do?
I think I know that I've succeeded, and that's a great question. Also loaded. I think I know that I've succeeded when I can look out and recognize that more young people, especially now, I think, students and young people are really going through mental health challenges like never before. I can't imagine being younger and not having the opportunity to see my friends, to hang out with my friends, to go to school and learn more about myself around friends and community. I think when young people, more young people, have an opportunity to really express themselves in a positive way, to talk about, the pain and the hardship and the trauma that they've actually dealt with, I think that's one way to measure success. Another way to measure success is to really highlight the profile of poets, that the notion of starving artists, like we can starve that notion of starving artists, right, so much so that it almost is eradicated. The other aspect is to really honor those that have come before me. I've had mentors that have helped me in the poetry scene, and I really want to make sure that I've honored them during this 2 years, because again, there's trailblazers who in the province, in the city, in the country, that have really allowed these opportunities to be afforded to young folks like myself, right? I would also say to really be able to advocate for a generation that isn't afraid to speak up, that isn't afraid to talk about issues that are affecting them and their communities, because that's why I picked up a pen. I picked up a pen because I realized like stuff was going on in the world and within me, in the world, that were affecting me, that I wanted to share my experiences in relation to how they're affecting me, so that other folks can feel like their stories were heard and their stories were also experienced, or shared in the experience as well. The other thing too for me is I really want to work with the education system to do some of the work I mentioned prior to, to work with teachers and educators to help young people learn to express themselves using poetry, because it's a very accessible art form. You need a pen and a paper, and that's pretty much it. So I would say those are a few ways that I would like to measure success. And if I was to add to it as well, it would be to continue making my parents proud.
Yeah, always. It's such an exciting opportunity, really, when you look at the potential. And I would imagine, that charges you a little bit when you think about what can be done. And again, you're the first, so you want to keep your expectations reasonable and not, there's only a shoot for the stars, so to speak, but you also want to keep them reasonable at the same time, what can be accomplished, because it is only 2 years. But at the same time, there's a level of excitement at the possibilities. I think you talk about sort of charging young people and getting them excited about poetry, or even about the arts in general. I think those are tremendous opportunities. And when I first heard the role, I heard about the announcement. I was excited, and as I started to learn more about it myself, because it was the first time I sort of understand it, I was, oh my goodness, this is there's some potential here to have a major impact in a major way. So I'm excited for you too, Randell. I really am.
Thank you so much, Adley. I really appreciate it. Appreciate it. And thanks for, just reaching out in general to have these conversations.
Yeah. Well, we certainly want to keep them going. We want to keep them going, and we'll certainly keep an eye on what you have coming, and we'll we'll encourage others to do the same and support and share and just, be a community as we should be and help one another.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for being here and all the best.
Thank you. I appreciate that, sir.
Back we are here on the podcast, and I first off want to send my congratulations once again to Randell on the appointment, as well as my appreciation for him stopping by and hanging out on the podcast with me. Like I said before, from my point of view, I think this appointment is a really big deal for a whole bunch of reasons. You just think of the opportunity that it provides for the arts communities, the community, the chance to elevate the platform of poetry in general. But the big one for me comes from the standpoint of representation. Randell brings a whole different viewpoint to the role as a spoken word artist, and the perspective that he can offer in this position is going to be invaluable. And it's also going to serve him quite well, having those past experiences. The other thing that it'll give that appointment also has the ability to inspire the next generation into seeing the things that are possible, and that sky's the limit. You can't compete with that. That's so, again, congratulations, Randell. This is awesome for you. Hey, listen, if you haven't registered for email notifications of the podcast, you can do so by heading over to bestaudaciouslife.com. All you've got to do is enter your email address and you'll be immediately alerted every time new content comes out. To our listeners, I'm always appreciative of you for being on the podcast, so thank you for your tremendous and ongoing support. It's always appreciated. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by R.I.S E Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.